Welcome to tons of tips for taking awesome pictures with your iPhone or iPad. In this video, we're going to discuss the camera app basics. I'm Jill from BoomerTech Adventures. Let's get started. It's really best if you have your device with you, so grab it and follow along. What we'll be discussing in the video you can see listed here. Everything from how to access the camera app to things like screenshots, different ways to trip the shutter, types of videos, types of images. Did you know there are 3 ways to open the camera app? You can open it from the lock screen, from the home screen, and from the control center. From the lock screen and the control center, you notice there's an asterisk. These 2 methods allow for fast access to the camera without going through all sorts of opening up of the device. So, lock screen, well, what is it? Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about older iPhones that have home buttons. I think this would be through iPhone 8. The lock screen is what you see when you turn your phone on. And if you look down in the right-hand corner, it's very light. You can just barely see it. There is a camera icon. Look at the orangish arrow and you'll see it. To open the camera app, all you need to do is slide your finger up from that camera app and your camera app should open. Now, the newer iPhones, the 10s and the 11s, don't have home buttons. So what do? Well, you use something called a long press on the camera icon. Once again, it's down in the lower right-hand corner. Now, a long press is when you put more pressure on when you touch the screen. It's not just a quick tap. To set it up, you need to go to Settings, Accessibility, and then Touch. And you have to make sure that the 3D option is turned on. Let's look at that a little more closely. So on the left, you see the screen for settings in an iPhone. And if you scroll down to Accessibility, and tap there, you will see the screen on the right. And again, if you scroll down, you'll see the word Touch. You want to tap Touch, or that little arrow over on the right. Once you do that, this screen on the left will show up. And there's a variety of things which we're not going to go through on this little video, but you'll see where it says 3D. You want that on. When you tap that, this next screen on the right shows up. And again, double check the 3D touch is on, it's green. And notice that you have the ability to control the sensitivity and the duration of that long touch. You can have just a light touch all the way to a firm touch. You can have it be a fast touch or a slow touch. You need to figure out what works best with you. And the great thing about settings is you can always come back and change what you have put in. So again, in order to use that camera icon on the lock screen, you do need to make sure that the 3D option is turned on. Now, the second way, of course, to access your camera app is through your home screen. And everybody knows their home screen. It's got your apps, it's got your dock on it. This particular home screen on the left, I think, is from an iPhone 6. Yours may look a little differently. But you know that you just tap your icon to open the app. and you will see something like the image on the right. Yours may look a little different depending which phone you have. I believe this particular picture is from an iPhone 5, but they're pretty similar. Now, the third way is the control center. And I've found that some people have never even found their control center, so let's locate it. If you are operating iOS 13, which means you have kept up to date with all of your updates, software updates, then you will most likely find your control center by swiping down from the upper right-hand corner where that maroon arrow is pointing. Just swipe down and you should see a dialog box, which I'll show you in the next slide. However, if that doesn't work, then try something different. Go to the bottom of your screen and swipe up from the very bottom. And you almost have to get down into that black section and swipe up. Again, it depends which model iPhone and which software you are running. But one of these two methods should get you to the control center. And here's a picture of a control center. The control center is simply a fast way for you to access a variety of apps. You can see sort of in the middle on the right is the camera app, and you can just tap it to open. At another time, you ought to go into your control center and look at all your options. You can see that you can turn your phone to airplane mode there. You can put on Do Not Disturb. You can choose how loud you want the sound to be. It really is the control center of the cockpit, so to speak. Some people never use it. Other people use it all the time. I just want you to know that that's the third way you can open your camera app. All right, once you've got your camera open, let's look at all the different icons and words and make sure we know what they all mean. Now, locate on your screen the little camera icon. On this particular screen, it's up at the top. On the newer cameras, newer iPhones, it's down at the bottom. But this is your lens direction. And if you've never played with it, just tap it. And you can see this is how people take selfies. And you tap it again and you go back to the regular setting, which is focused outward. Now you will notice in this image that there's a grid. I'm going to show you at the end of this video how to turn that on. The grid helps you in composition, how you decide how you want your pictures to look. And there'll be much more about the grid in the video about taking stunning pictures. Moving down, you will see that you can choose the shape of your image, and we're going to talk specifics in just a few seconds. The shutter, of course, is the round circle in the middle, and you just need to tap it lightly because it really doesn't go off until you remove your finger. So don't jab at it. That just moves your hand and makes your pictures fuzzy. So just tap it lightly, and as you remove your finger, it will trip. These three circles are filters, and we're going to look at those in a little bit. Sometimes they're called effects, and you can also see the same symbol in the Photos app. Now, the little thumbnail down in the lower left corner is your camera roll, and that's where you can quickly check the picture you've just taken to see whether or not you like it. If you like it, you just leave it there and it's in the Photos app. If you don't like it, you can trash it. That's one of the lovely things about digital photography. Also, on the same row as the shape of the image, that's where we'll find the videos, and we'll look at those in a little bit more detail in a few seconds. Moving up, you will see that the lightning bolt is your symbol or the icon for the flash. And then there is something called HDR, and it says off. HDR stands for high dynamic range, and there is an entire video in this course dedicated to that, and that's where you can find all the details about HDR. Now, some of you may have a screen that looks more like this one, and it has some additional icons. With the maroon arrow, that's the timer, where you can set it to go off and give you some time to get in the picture. The yellow circle icon is for live photos, and again, we're going to talk about that very specifically in a couple of slides. Now, if you have a iPhone 11, you're going to have a few extra icons that other people don't, and they are for night mode. Night mode allows you to lighten up a picture that is very dark if you're taking it at dusk or even in a dark room like this particular image. You see that the arrow is pointing to a moon, and we're going to talk about that. Aspect ratio is the where it says 4:3, and then the 10 and the 11 both have a zoom. And right now, this particular image has a 1x. If you were to tap on it, on either the 10 or the 11, it would go to 2x, which zooms in a bit. So let's talk about night mode. Again, you can use the night mode with either the regular shooting size of the lens or going to the zoom, the 2x. It will come on automatically in low light. What happens is the icon, the moon, turns white in low light. When you tap it, it turns yellow. Now it's active. And if you have an 11 and you try that, you'll see the difference immediately. A number appears near the icon, and that's the number of seconds in the exposure. Now, because it's low light, it takes longer. The lens has to stay open longer than in the regular light. And so you just need to be aware of that and know that you have to hold that camera, that iPhone, that iPad steady for a little longer than you would with a regular picture. And the number next to it, or under it, under the number, you can control how long you want that exposure to last. So again, something to play around with if you have an 11. Aspect ratio, that's simply a fancy way of talking about the ratio or the width to the height of the image. 4:3 is standard. However, you can also do with 1:1 where the width and the height is the same, and 16:9. And you can also crop these in editing in the Photos app. Okay. Let's take a minute to focus in on the types of image you can take with any of the iPhones. The first is the regular. That is the rectangular shape 4:3. Right now it's in landscape, which means the longer side is on the bottom. You know that if you turn it 45 degrees, you will have the portrait, and it will be longer on the vertical than it is on the horizontal. Square is another choice where all sides are equal. What's good to know about square, if you like to post to social media, this is probably the setting you want to use. What happens with the rectangular is you post to Facebook and it often gets clipped. Your entire image is likely to be posted if you use the square. And then there's the panoramic. And of course that is an option you can use to get a wide sweep of the landscape or room. Let's take a quick look at panoramic. Now, right now I'm going to go over how you take a panoramic picture, but there is a video just on panoramic that goes into very specific details and physically shows you what happens. So the couple of things you need to remember is when you're taking a pano, you need to keep your device in portrait or the upright position. You start by aiming the camera, the lens, at the point where you want the image to start. You tap the shutter once. Don't hold your finger down on it, just tap it once, and it will turn from a round circle to the one you see in the image, which is a square within a circle. Then very slowly sweep the camera in the direction of the arrow, trying to keep that arrow the best you can on that yellow line. And when you have finished, tap the shutter again. And it will show up in both photos and in your camera roll on the camera app. And if you look at that image carefully, right in the middle, you can see I took the picture when I was partially through taking the pano, and you can see how it's beginning to form. And so you can watch that little section in the middle to see what your picture is looking like. But like I said, there's an entire video on taking a pano, and if you think this is something you would enjoy doing, you really should take time to watch it. Now, some of the later phones, more recent phones, some of the 8s, certainly the 10 and the 11, have what's called portrait mode. And portrait mode uses both the telephoto lens and the wide-angle lens. And it adjusts the depth of field. And so what happens is what's up front, the person, the portrait you're taking, is very clear, very sharp, but the background is fuzzy. And so if you look at this beyond the teddy bear, you can tell what's behind there, sort of, but it's fuzzed up so it doesn't distract from that portrait. There are different lighting effects which you can play around with. There are 4: natural, contour, studio, and stage. Here is an example of studio where the back part is all blacked out. Again, variety of options. The natural light will automatically blur the background. Now, you can change the look in the Photos app if you have taken a portrait. Let's look at that. If you go to your Photos app and open your albums and scroll down till you find media types, and then look for portrait. You see I've got it circled on the image. And on my iPhone, I have 36 examples of portrait. That means I had that setting chosen. I can then go in and I can play around with editing and change the lighting. Now, I want to be real clear that you understand, even if you have taken a picture of somebody close up, but you aren't using the portrait function, you cannot go in and do what you can with the portrait. But again, it's something fun to play around with when you have the time. And it's good to play around with it before you start taking pictures of people, weddings, that sort of thing, so you know or have a sense of what the different lighting styles will do for the portrait. Now, you also have video, and you just slide over to where it says video. You see it is in yellow on the left, and when you're ready to start the video, you simply tap the red shutter. That begins it. The microphone is pretty strong. It will pick up what people are saying. And when you're done, you then tap the red square, because that red circle, once you tap it, will turn to the square. And when you tap it, it will end. And up at the top, you can see how long the video has been running. Now, there's also something called time lapse, which is a form of video. In this case, time lapse collapses or compresses the images that you take over time into a sped up version. So this gentleman is in one of Chris Toy's cooking classes, and he's going to be making a wonton. Okay, so that's an example of time lapse. Here's another one. In this case, you have to look way at the back fencing, not the metal fencing, but the wooden fencing or on the deck. And I took this one. You can see there's kind of a grid there. I leaned it against a window, and I started it, and I left it there for 10 minutes and then came back and shut it off. And if you look carefully, you can see there are birds and a squirrel at the bird feeder. So again, what slow-mo does is it compresses a longer video into a short version. The third kind of video is slow-mo, and this is one coaches are using because you can actually track how people are doing a tennis swing, as an example here with Ed, so they can check and make corrections. Oops, let me go back there. Other people use it to, maybe capture ocean waves, or their dogs playing, or the children playing. Again, it's just something to play around with, but it slows everything down. And there is, in the video section, the extra videos, a video of slow motion capturing ocean waves, which you might enjoy watching and which might give you some ideas on how you might use slow-mo. Okay, now you remember I showed you that in some of the newer cameras, there is the live option. It was the yellow concentric circles. Well, live means it's actually a mini video. It shows the context that you're taking the picture. The way it works is, when you take a picture, there's a still frame, and it's in the middle. On either side of it is a 1.5 second video. So if you've opened a picture in your photos and you see a movement and you go, oh, what was that? It's because you had it on live. When do you want to use live? Well, it's when there's movement, a gurgling brook, a waterfall, wagging tails, somebody doing something active. Now, you don't have to have live on. It's totally up to you. If you go to Settings, scroll down to the Camera app, you will see that you can turn live on and off. And again, I will show you that at the end of this video. So that's why some of the pictures seem to jump when you open them up in Photos. Now, if you send them to someone, they are not going to see the live action. They will just see the still. What you need to know, of course, is that this takes a little longer for the picture to be taken. So again, you have to hold your iPhone or your iPad very still if you are taking a live photo. Another option we talked about on the home screen or on the camera screen were the 3 circles, filters. On some cameras they're called effects. And this is fun because you can change the overall vision of your picture. Here you see a picture of a plant pot, original, it's in color, but then using a filter, I turned it to a black and white. So you've got a variety of choices, both on the camera app and also in the Photos app. And they're fun to play around with. Again, when you got a few minutes, take out your iPhone or your iPad and play around with those filters to see the different effect they can have on your pictures. They can give it a whole different feeling. Now, did you know there are 3 ways to set off the shutter? Well, actually, there are 4. There's the shutter button, which we've already talked about on the camera app screen. But here's the cool stuff. Your volume buttons on your iPhone or your iPad also will set off the shutter. And you might say, well, why would I care about that? Well, you know, sometimes when you're taking a picture with your camera app, it's hard to get to that shutter without moving it. Like if you're scrunched down and trying to get something low, or you're at an odd angle, if you have those volume buttons, so they're on the top edge of your phone, you can just click either the up or down volume and it will take a picture. If you have your phone or your iPad and your camera app open, why don't you go ahead and try it? The second additional way, do you recognize that picture? Those are the volume controls on your earbuds. Again, they will set off the shutter, which is kind of cool. You might be trying to take a picture of a puppy or a grandchild, and you really don't want them focusing on the camera. You want to get a candid. Well, if you put your earbuds in, you can focus the camera where you want it, or focus your iPhone or your iPad. Call it a camera, even though it's just the camera app. And you can use those volume controls on your earbuds. Pretty cool. The third is the timer. Now, the older iPhones don't have a timer, but the newer ones, I think from 6 on, do. So how does that work? Well, you tap that icon that looks sort of like a clock on the top of the screen. And what will happen is you will see that the screen changes. And you will see it will say 3S and 10S. That stands for 3-second delay and 10-second delay. And so if you want to make sure that you can be in the family picture, once you've either put your phone on a tripod or you've set it up against something so it won't move, you can choose either 3 seconds or 10 seconds. Other people use it when they want to make sure the picture's really clear and crisp, and they don't have to worry about hitting the shutter button right at the right second. So once you choose 3 or 10, the next thing you will see is it will say 10 seconds. I've chosen 10 seconds at the top. And then I do touch or tap the shutter, but then I get a countdown from 10, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and then the camera will take the picture. So that's kind of a cool function of the camera app. And again, it's something to play around with. Now, I promised that early on that we would look at camera settings. So if you have your device handy, go to settings, that's the gray icon, looks like a gear, and scroll down to see camera, and it's quite a ways down. tap on camera, and you will see a screen that will look somewhat like the one on the left. I can't promise you that it will look exactly like mine because it really does depend on which iPhone or which iPad you have. But you see you have choices. So one of them is the grid. And if you don't like the grid, you can turn it off. I keep mine on because I really do use it for composition purposes as I'm trying to figure out what's the best shot to take, the most artistic. Now, I assure you the grid does not show up in your finished picture. It's just there to help you. Scan for QR codes. We're going to look at those, and you can decide whether you want that on. Notice that you go down. You can also control whether you have HDR on automatically, so the software makes the decision whether or not you're going to use HDR. And again, we have an entire video that explains what HDR is, the high dynamic range. And some people like to control that themselves so they don't have it on auto. Other people like to not worry about it, so they just put it on auto. Then at the top it says preserve settings. So if you tap on that little arrow, this is the screen on the right that shows up. And what I want to focus on is this is where you control live photo. Now, again, some of you may see live photo on your first screen. It depends on what model camera, iPhone, iPad you're using. So those are the camera settings. And again, you always have the option to come back and change them if you don't like them. Now, QR codes stands for quick response. Have you been in a store where you see these kind of funny little mosaic symbols around? Well, those are QR codes. And what's really neat is now you can just use your camera code to read them. Before, 2 or 3 years ago, you had to download a separate app. So what you do is you hold your camera lens up to the QR code so it fills the screen. Immediately, you don't have to do anything else. You can see the yellow corners. You want the QR code within those yellow corners, and you want it to be clear, not fuzzy. So you may have to hold it still for a few seconds. What will happen then is a dialog box will appear up at the top. You can see where it's going to say, it says open Grammarly.com in Safari. That's where that QR code is for. And so if I tap on it, it will take me to that particular website. Now, when I bought a full-size camera, I was at Best Buy and they had all these QR codes. So what I did is I simply went around and I held my phone with my camera app open and I could read. I'd go to the website and I would read all the details about that particular camera model, and I would also see some reviews. So it can be really handy. The last thing I want to talk about are screenshots. Screenshots are when you take a picture of what's on your screen. So example, the picture of the image on the right from Southern Living is a picture of plant arrangements in pots. And I'm always trying to create the most beautiful arrangements during the summer, and I'm not nearly as good as Southern Living. But I took this picture so it would remind me of some possibilities with shapes and colors and types of flowers. Sometimes I use screenshot for recipes. If I can get the entire recipe on the screen, that especially works with an iPad. So with the iPhone 10 or 11, no home button, you quickly click the on-off button and the up volume button at the same time. Boom! And you'll hear a click, you see a flash, and it will have taken a picture of whatever is on your screen. It then goes to the Photos app. iPhones with a home button, you click the on-off button and the home button at the same time. And you may have to practice this because sometimes we think we're doing it at the same time, but we're not. We're pressing one a little bit before the other, and it doesn't work. Now, caution, caution, caution. With the 10 and the 11 phones, do not hold the buttons for long. You will be summoning emergency services. This happened. I was teaching adult ed, and I'm showing them how to do it. I've got my hand pressing, and suddenly an alarm goes off from the phone, and the direction said, cancel if this is not an emergency. If I hadn't, my phone would have received a phone call from emergency 911 saying, are you in distress? So just know that holding those two buttons down on a 10 and 11 for a lengthy, not even a really long time, can get you in contact with emergency services, which might be good in some circumstances, but not when you're just taking a screenshot. Okay, now there's one kind of cool thing here. With screenshots, you can also do markup. And actually, you can do it with any photo. So what is markup? Markup allows you to write right on the photo. So what you would do, again, very quickly, we'll have another whole course on the Photos app. You just go to the Photos app, you go to Edit, and you look at three dots. See the three dots up there in the upper right-hand corner? Tap on that. What comes up next is an option for markup. Tap Markup, and then you will get a screen similar to the one on the right. And if you look down at the bottom, you'll see there's choices of colors, there's choices of marker sizes, there's an eraser. If you tap that plus sign, it allows you to type in something on the picture. It's really kind of fun to play around with if you like to make personalized cards, etc. So here's an example. Chocolate chip cookies made fresh for you. Use markup, use the text option under plus, and typed in those words. Now that brings us to the end of the basics. I just want to go over that there are additional videos in this course. One is setting focus and exposure, which we didn't talk about at all. You really want to make sure that you understand the control you have over the focus and exposure of your camera app. I mentioned about HDR. HDR helps you take a better picture under difficult situations. The third video is, again, more details on how to take that panoramic. If you want to see an example of slow motion taken with an iPhone, the video there. And there is a video also for tips on taking the very best pictures, the most interesting pictures you can. So please, I hope you will take advantage of these videos plus the blog posts and the PDFs which accompany this course. Now you're familiar with the basics of your iPhone and your iPad camera app. Of course, the only way to become proficient at using the app is to practice. We hope you will find the tips in the various videos and the various PDFs and blog posts to be helpful, and we hope you will enjoy exploring your world with your camera app. This is Jill from BoomerTech Adventures.